He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen as the auction countdown ticked away. One last bid sat on the item labeled Surplus Sentient Tech D grade. A bargain, really? The text read. Functionality limited. May contain mild defects. Jake grinned. Mild defects meant he could fix it and flip it for a fat profit. Come to Papa, he whispered, slamming the confirm bid button. Seconds later, the auction ended with a pleasant chime. Sold. His grin widened. A week later, he stood in front of the crate, rubbing his hands together. The mechanical locks hissed open. Steam poured out. Inside was not a crate of malfunctioning AI components or discarded robot limbs. It was a girl. A very naked, very blue, very annoyed-looking girl. She blinked once, then again, her crystalline eyes slowly focusing on him. You've got to be kidding me. Jake stumbled backward, tripping over a loose cable. What the hell? The girl pushed herself up on one elbow, completely unfazed by his shock, and peered at her surroundings. Her lips quirked into a sarcastic smile as she took in the cluttered workshop filled with half-assembled gadgets, rusted parts, and suspicious stains. So, let me guess. You were expecting space junk? She gestured at herself. Surprise. I didn't order. He flailed, pointing at the label on the crate like it would somehow excuse the situation. It said surplus tech. She snorted, swinging her legs over the edge of the pod. Oh, honey. I'm surplus, all right. Defective as hell. You've got a real bargain here. His eyes darted wildly as he fought not to stare at her bare skin. Why aren't you wearing? She glanced down at herself, as if noticing for the first time. Oh. Right. She reached inside the crate, pulling out a sleek, skin-tight jumpsuit. With deliberate slowness, she slid it on, watching him squirm. Better? Jake's face burned. Could you not do that while I'm... What? Embarrassed? She zipped up the front, smirking. Relax, human. I'm not going to bite. Unless you ask nicely. His jaw dropped. What is wrong with you? She tilted her head, pretending to ponder. Where do I start? Chronic sarcasm. Non-compliant personality. Complete failure to respect authority. All the reasons I got slapped with a D-grade sentience tag. She grinned. Lucky for you, I'm also really good with my hands. That's not... He pointed a shaky finger at her. I'm sending you back. Her eyes sparkled with amusement. Good luck. I'm non-returnable. She gestured toward the crate's fine print. Sure enough, there it was, asterisk no refunds. No exchanges, asterisk. Jake groaned. I was supposed to get spare parts, not a... Gorgeous alien woman? She offered helpfully. A headache. She laughed, hopping down from the crate and stretching like a cat. Name's Arya, by the way. Since we're apparently stuck with each other, you might as well get used to it. I'm not, we're not stuck. His words sputtered as she began inspecting the workshop, picking up tools and discarded gadgets with mild curiosity. You really should clean this place, she muttered, holding up a greasy wrench. And what's with all these tools? Compensating for something? He snatched the wrench from her hand. Touch my stuff and I swear. Oh, calm down. She smirked again. What's the worst I could do? Turn your life upside down? He exhaled sharply, gripping the wrench like a lifeline. This was going to be a disaster. Jake stared at her. There she was, standing in the middle of his workshop, holding a dirty wrench like she was about to fix his life, and everything in it screamed chaos. Okay, he muttered to himself. She's not an AI. She's not a malfunctioning robot. She's an alien who doesn't seem to have any filter. Arya glanced at him from the corner of her eye, smirking as she casually ran her fingers over a pile of cables. You look like you're about to explode. Relax. You got a bargain. I didn't ask for a bargain. Jake snapped, pacing. I wanted parts. I wanted something useful. A piece of junk I could sell. You're not even what the auction described. What am I supposed to do with you? Why don't you try starting with thank you for rescuing me? She shot back, rolling her eyes. I mean, I was in a box for God knows how long. Least you could do is pretend you're happy to see me. Happy to see you? Jake gaped. I didn't sign up for this. Yeah, you keep saying that, but here we are. You bid on me. Now you get to live with me. Arya strutted toward the workbench, picking up random tools like she was deciding what to wear. So, what do you do around here? Fix ships? Or is this your personal project? Jake clenched his jaw. You really are one of a kind, you know that? She turned to him with an innocent face. Oh, I know. You should be grateful. Most people get stuck with low-grade, obedient units. You got me. The real deal. I'm a masterpiece of sarcasm and sharp wit. That's what they didn't tell you, right? Great, Jake muttered. A sarcastic alien who thinks she's some kind of, what? Princess? Don't be so crude, she quipped, lifting her chin. I'm a royal runaway. I didn't exactly sign up for all that glamour. It's overrated. Besides, if I stayed, I'd probably be assassinated by my wonderful family. So here I am. Stuck with you. Assassinated? Jake blinked, half in disbelief, half intrigued. What the hell kind of royal family are you running from? The kind that doesn't appreciate independent thought, she replied coolly, like it was a common Tuesday. They're really into the whole conquer and control thing. Which, you know, doesn't leave a lot of room for someone like me. I like to think for myself. Jake frowned. So you're an outlaw? Arya smirked, holding up her hands. I prefer free spirit. She paused. Anyway, I'm more interested in fixing your ship. Your engine's a mess. My ship? Jake laughed, pointing at her as if she'd said something completely insane. You're telling me you're going to fix my ship? Don't act like it's impossible. I have all the tools right here. She gestured at the cluttered workbench, her smile turning mischievous. And unlike you, I actually know how to use them. Jake crossed his arms. Sure you do. What are you going to do next? Turn the engine into a toaster? Arya glared at him, as if he'd just insulted her entire lineage. Excuse me, I'm a master at space technology. This is your lucky day. She walked over to his ship's open engine compartment. For starters, you've got this whole wiring situation wrong. What did you do, let a drunken rat in here to do maintenance? Jake followed her over, watching as she fiddled with the wiring, turning the ship's engine into a jumbled mess of blinking lights and wires. How do you even know what you're doing? You've been in that box for God knows how long, and now you're telling me you can fix my... It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Except I don't need all the pieces. She shot him a look over her shoulder, raising an eyebrow. You think I'm just some defective unit? A degrade? He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come out. That's right. I'm a defective, she continued, lowering her voice as she worked. In the sense that I didn't follow the rules, didn't want to sit pretty and do nothing. They didn't like that. So they labeled me as unmarketable. Now here I am, in your workshop, fixing your stuff. Jake watched in disbelief as she twirled a wire around her fingers, her movements graceful despite the rough environment. You're insane. Arya laughed, a full, genuine laugh that somehow made her seem a little less dangerous, or maybe even a little more. Yeah, I'm a little crazy. You can't be royalty without being a little off, right? He let out a frustrated breath, rubbing his temples. I don't know how I got myself into this. I don't know how you didn't get yourself into this sooner, she retorted, her eyes gleaming as she continued to work on the ship. You've got the perfect amount of cluelessness. It's charming, in a way. I'm not charming, Jake shot back, his patience wearing thin. You know, when I signed up for this, I was hoping for a solid investment. A few extra parts to flip, make some money, and get out of here. Too bad, huh? Now you've got me instead. If it helps, though, I'm pretty handy. She finished what she was doing and slammed the engine compartment closed. All fixed. He stared at the ship, which now hummed softly, the lights on the dashboard flickering to life. You're serious? Damn right I am. She gave him a look that could only be described as smug satisfaction. I just saved your ass. Jake was speechless. There was nothing left to say. But that didn't stop him from trying. You're not exactly what I expected, he mumbled. Good. You should never expect the obvious. She smirked, walking past him. And stop looking at my ass, I'll have to charge you for that. Jake's cheeks turned crimson, his brain scrambling to process everything. She was still messing with him, still making him feel like an idiot, but somehow, he couldn't stay mad. And if he was being honest with himself, he didn't want to. Jake sat back in his seat, watching as Arya busied herself with the ship's control panel. Her fingers danced across the touch screen, moving with precision. The hum of the engine echoed through the workshop, a stark contrast to the chaos that had been his life up until now. I still can't believe you fixed it, Jake muttered, rubbing his eyes. How the hell did you do that? Arya shot him a smirk over her shoulder, leaning against the console. What can I say? I'm full of surprises. She paused. Unlike you? You really need to get out of this dump, you know. It's depressing in here. I'm just trying to survive, Jake grumbled, leaning forward. This was supposed to be an investment, Arya. Get in, get some parts, get out. I'm not looking for any trouble. She snorted. Trouble's not something you find. It's something that finds you. You've been here for, what, 3 years? You're a prime target for the kind of trouble I deal with. Jake blinked. What exactly is it that you deal with? Because it sure as hell isn't fixing ships. Arya gave him a pointed look, like he should have known. Oh, right. I forgot. I'm a royal runaway. He stared. What does that even mean? It means, she said, flipping a switch on the console, that the people who were supposed to care about me want me dead, and now there's a whole bunch of people looking for me. They'd do anything to get their hands on me. Jake felt his stomach twist. Wait. What? People want you dead? Yeah, well, nothing says family love like sending an assassin after you, she replied casually, as if she was discussing the weather. Don't worry. I can handle it. The people chasing me? They're amateurs. They think I'm just some princess who ran off because of a broken heart, or something. What they don't know is that I'm worth more alive than dead. You've got to be kidding me, Jake said, running a hand through his hair. This just keeps getting better and better. Well, I was hoping for a better reaction, but sure. Let's go with I'm totally screwed instead. She rolled her eyes. But don't get too comfortable. You're not exactly off the hook either. I may be the one they're after, but the fact that you've got me now means you're probably on their list too. Great. Just what I needed, Jake muttered. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, then looked back at her. So, what exactly is it you're good at, besides fixing my ship and getting me into a whole new level of trouble? Arya gave him a sideways glance. I'm good at a lot of things, sweetie. One of those things? Making people disappear. Jake blinked, not sure if he should be impressed or terrified. Disappearing people? What are you, a trained assassin? Arya flashed him a grin that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Let's just say I know how to handle myself. You learn a few tricks when you're the one everyone's after. Not everything is solved with pretty words and charming smiles, you know. Jake tried not to let that comment get to him, but it did. He couldn't quite decide if he was more attracted to her or terrified of what she was capable of. You're completely insane, you know that? He said finally. She smirked. I get that a lot. Yeah, well, you're definitely not my idea of easy to handle. He took a deep breath. But right now, I guess you're the one thing keeping me from losing my mind entirely. Gee, that's sweet, she teased, crossing her arms. You're lucky I like being underestimated. Jake was about to say something else when a loud beep echoed from the control panel. Arya froze, then turned to him with wide eyes. I think you might want to look at this. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He rushed over to her side, his eyes scanning the screen. It was a warning. Several ships were coming up on their position fast. Shit! Jake swore. You didn't tell me this was happening. I wasn't sure it was. Arya snapped, leaning forward to tap at the console. But looks like I'm right on the money. It's them. They found me. Jake's stomach sank. So what now? Arya cracked her knuckles. Now we play it my way. She pulled out a small device and attached it to the control panel. It's a scrambler. I'll make sure they can't track us, at least not right away. Jake raised an eyebrow. And what if they've already pinpointed our location? Then we'll have to move fast, she said, still tapping away at the console. We'll run, but it'll get messy. You ready for messy? Do I have a choice? Jake muttered, the panic beginning to set in. Nope. She shot him a grin. So hold on tight, because things are about to get interesting. Jake's brain barely processed her words before she hit a button and the ship jerked to life. It shot forward, faster than anything he'd ever experienced. He was thrown back against his seat, gripping the armrests, as the ship made a series of erratic turns. The lights inside flickered, and he could hear the faint hum of the engine struggling to keep up with the rapid pace. Arya sat in front of the controls, her expression calm, like she was enjoying the ride. How's that for messy? She asked, her voice cool. Jake couldn't breathe for a second. The sheer speed was unreal. He couldn't decide if he was impressed or terrified, so he settled for a mix of both. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered under his breath. This is just the warm-up, Arya said, eyes gleaming. You better hope they're not good at following clues, because we're about to throw them off the trail. Jake clenched his teeth. He didn't know whether to thank her or punch her in the face. But as the ship shot off into the stars, he couldn't help but admit, no one had ever made his life this exciting before. Jake had barely managed to regain his breath when the ship jerked again, throwing him forward in his seat. He grasped the armrests tightly, trying to steady himself as the ship tore through the vacuum of space. Arya remained calm, her hands moving expertly over the control panel, flipping switches with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Can you slow down a little? Jake gasped, trying to catch his bearings. I think my heart is about to explode. Trust me, we're not going to slow down. The second I give them a chance to catch up, they'll be on us. Arya replied, her voice low but steady. Besides, you're lucky to be along for the ride. Most people don't get this kind of adrenaline rush. Jake clenched his teeth. I'd prefer to get off this ride alive, thank you. Alive, sure. Boring, though, she teased, her eyes flashing with amusement as she flicked a few more switches. This is the kind of shit you can't make up. Jake shot her a look. I'm pretty sure I'm going to need therapy after this. Who even are these people chasing you? I told you, Arya said, her fingers still flying over the panel. They're my family, or what's left of them. But they don't exactly love me. I did something that pissed them off and now they're ready to make me disappear. It's their way of saving face, you know? Saving face by killing their own? Jake asked incredulously. Standard royal behavior, Arya responded nonchalantly. You'd be surprised what kind of things get swept under the rug when you're dealing with a bunch of power-hungry sociopaths. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Jake asked, feeling the tension rise in his chest again. Because it's not. She grinned. Maybe not, but I'm trying to help you understand that the shitstorm I just dragged you into isn't a surprise. This is just how things go in my world. I get into trouble, I run, people try to catch me. The only difference is that this time, I'm dragging you along. He sighed, feeling the weight of it all starting to sink in. Why couldn't you just disappear? Find some other way out? I tried, she said, her voice quieter now, almost pensive. But I'm not stupid. They'd find me no matter where I went. The only thing I can do is run faster. And well, now that you're involved, you're stuck with me. Jake's thoughts were jumbled, the sudden realization of just how deep this was sinking and hitting him hard. He'd gone from bidding on some salvage tech to being involved in an intergalactic royal mess. A mess he wasn't sure he was equipped to handle. Great, he muttered. Just when I thought I could live my life in peace, I end up running from people who can probably wipe me off the face of the galaxy. That's the spirit, Arya said with a wicked grin, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But if it makes you feel better, I'm pretty good at dodging people who are trying to kill me. So you'll be fine. Jake shot her a look. I'm glad you have that kind of confidence. I don't share it. Well, if you did, we wouldn't be in this situation now, would we? She looked over at him, her eyes twinkling. I mean, really. You didn't expect this to go smoothly, did you? No, he said, rubbing his face with his hands. But I also didn't expect to be chased across the stars by your homicidal family. Arya laughed lightly. Oh, it's not just my family. They've got some hired goons. But like I said, amateurs. You know what? You should start thinking of this as a vacation. Trust me, I'll keep you alive long enough to have some fun. Jake didn't even know how to respond to that. Fun? This was a nightmare. So now what? He asked. How long are we going to be running? She paused for a moment, her fingers still tapping at the controls. Well, I'm guessing we've got a few hours before they can triangulate our location. Which gives us enough time to get a little distance. And then what? And then... Arya grinned again. Then we start messing with them. Make them think they're chasing the wrong person. Jake's eyes widened. You're going to trick them? Exactly, she said. I've got some tricks up my sleeve. I'm going to use my knowledge of their tech against them. Jake stared at her, shaking his head. This just gets crazier by the second. Welcome to my world, Arya replied, clearly enjoying his disbelieving reaction. He rubbed his forehead, trying to process it all. So, what do I do while you play your little game of cat and mouse? First off, stop looking so panicked, she said, glancing at him with a raised brow. Second, you can help me set up a few things. I need to disguise our trajectory so they can't track us. You're good with computers, right? Jake blinked, caught off guard by the question. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I know my way around a few systems, but I'm not exactly a genius. Well, you're not an idiot either. That's a start, she said, pulling up a series of complex schematics on the screen. This is where you come in. I need you to help me rig the ship's systems. If they start to catch up, I need a backup plan. Jake looked at the screen, the maze of wires and diagrams appearing like an alien language. This is insane, he muttered, his fingers hovering over the controls. But I guess I've got nothing to lose. Arya shot him a playful glance. That's the spirit. We're going to need all the help we can get. He exhaled, sitting up straighter in his seat, focusing on the task in front of him. It wasn't much, but for once, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely out of his depth. Arya had already dragged him into a life of chaos, but at least now, he had a chance to fight back. All right, he said, fingers tapping at the console. Let's see what we can do. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was spiraling further and further into madness. But in the back of his mind, there was also the smallest flicker of something else, a strange sense of excitement. For the first time in years, he wasn't just sitting on the sidelines, watching things happen. He was in the middle of it. And he wasn't backing down. Jake's fingers moved with surprising speed as he worked on the console, trying to follow Arya's instructions. The hum of the ship filled his ears, but his mind was elsewhere, racing to process the situation. Every part of him was on edge. There was no turning back now. Arya was still focused, her face illuminated by the dim glow of the screens, her fingers flying across the panel with a confidence that was almost unsettling. All right, we've got a few minutes. Just keep your eyes peeled. I'll handle the rest. Jake nodded, his mind reeling. He could barely wrap his head around the fact that he was sitting in a ship, helping a royal runaway evade her assassins. But what troubled him more than the danger, the chase, or even the absurdity of it all was something he hadn't quite figured out yet. Arya. She was smart, sarcastic, and way too damn attractive for his own good. He was trying his best to ignore the way his stomach fluttered every time she made one of her sharp comments. Hell, he'd been through enough strange situations to know better than to get caught up in personal feelings. But she made it hard to concentrate when she smirked, when she caught him off guard with her dry humor or sudden bursts of sharp wit. "You're thinking too hard," she called out, pulling him out of his thoughts. "I'm trying not to," Jake replied, pulling his attention back to the task at hand. "But this is kind of, well, insane. That's one word for it," she shot back, her voice light, unbothered. "Honestly, you're handling this better than most people would." Jake exhaled, focusing on the panel in front of him. "How do you do it? How do you just deal with all this?" Arya paused for a moment, then shrugged, her eyes glinting with a strange mixture of humor and something more complicated. "You get used to it. You can't afford to freeze up, not when you've got a bounty on your head and a galaxy full of people willing to take you down." Jake felt his chest tighten. The casual way she said it, as if it was just another day in the life of someone who'd seen it all, struck him more than he wanted to admit. It was a reminder of just how far out of his league he was. A reminder that everything about this, about her, was dangerous. "I get that," he said, voice quiet, almost serious. "But that doesn't mean I'm okay with it. I never signed up for any of this." "Well, you didn't sign up for much, did you?" she teased, her lips curling into a playful smirk. "You just put in a bid for a crate and ended up with me. But here we are." Jake chuckled despite himself. "Yeah. Here we are. Don't get too comfortable," she warned, her tone shifting back to a more businesslike edge. "We're not out of the woods yet." Jake nodded, glancing back at the screen as it flickered. The warning light started flashing again, the unmistakable signal that their pursuers were closing in. He swallowed hard. "So, what now?" Arya didn't miss a beat. "Now we do what I do best, mess with their heads. We've got a few tricks left, but we need to make sure we've got the upper hand. They think they're chasing a runaway royal. Let's make them think they're after something else." Jake raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that?" Arya flashed him a grin that almost made him forget what they were dealing with. "Simple. We send them on a wild goose chase. A few well-placed decoys, a little bit of misdirection, and they'll be so busy trying to track the wrong thing, they'll never see us coming." Jake felt the tension ease slightly as he listened to her plan. He'd never been a fan of running, but if there was one thing he knew, it was that a good distraction could make all the difference. "All right," he said, settling back in his seat. "So we're playing cat and mouse." "Exactly," she said, already typing commands into the console. "Only, we're the ones with the claws this time." Jake couldn't help but admire the way she worked. It wasn't just her intelligence or her quick thinking, there was something about her confidence, her refusal to let the situation get the best of her. He'd seen people fall apart under less pressure. Arya, though? She thrived in it. His mind wandered again, and for a second, he wondered if he had any business being here. He wasn't a soldier, not even close. He wasn't a hero. He was a guy who sold scrap parts and hoped for a profit. But now, here he was, helping a runaway alien princess avoid a galactic bounty hunter. Not exactly how he had imagined his life going. But there was something oddly exciting about it, too. The thrill of the chase. The sense of being part of something far bigger than himself. It was the kind of rush that only came when everything was on the line. And for the first time in a long while, Jake wasn't just surviving. He was living. "You know," he said, his voice quieter this time, "if we make it out of this, I'm definitely going to need a drink." Arya turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "A drink? You really think you're going to celebrate after this?" "Hey, I'll celebrate when I've earned it," he said with a grin. "But right now, I'm just hoping I don't get vaporized in the next 10 minutes. Arya laughed, the sound light and teasing. "I'm not planning on letting that happen. But I'll take you up on that drink if we make it." Jake shook his head, still grinning despite the gravity of the situation. "Deal. But you owe me a lot more than just one drink after all this." Arya's eyes glinted with mischief. "We'll see. But first, let's survive. After that, we'll work out the details. The ship shuddered again, the vibration increasing as they veered off course. Jake glanced at the display, where their pursuers were now almost on top of them. The pressure was mounting again, but this time, Jake felt a little more confident. He wasn't alone in this anymore. Arya was right. They weren't out of the woods yet, but for once, he didn't feel entirely powerless. With her at the helm, there was a chance. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The decoys were set. The trap was laid. Now it was just a matter of making sure they didn't get caught in the net. Ready? Arya asked, eyes gleaming. Jake straightened in his seat, gripping the armrests. Let's do it. And with that, the game was on. The tension in the cockpit was almost unbearable as Jake and Arya executed the final steps of their plan. The ship hummed with a low intensity, as if it too could sense the impending danger. The decoys were deployed, the warp drive prepared for sudden jumps, and every single movement was calculated with military precision. Jake wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming, but he sure as hell didn't want to die unprepared. Arya's fingers flew over the control panel, her expression cool and calm. It was impressive how unfazed she was, as if everything was just another puzzle to solve, no matter how high the stakes. Jake, on the other hand, was still adjusting to the idea that he was actually part of the puzzle. His heart raced as he looked at the coordinates flashing on the screen, mapping out the course they needed to take. They had to lose their pursuers, and fast. They're almost on us, Jake said, his voice tight with anxiety. Do you think this is going to work? Arya glanced at him with an eyebrow raised. You have a better idea? Not really, he admitted, but his unease was palpable. I just don't want to end up as space debris. You'll be fine, she said, her tone dripping with a mix of confidence and sarcasm. It's not like I've ever gotten caught before. Jake wasn't sure if that was supposed to reassure him or not, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. The enemy ships were getting closer, their blips on the radar growing steadily larger. A bead of sweat trickled down the side of his face, and he wiped it away with the back of his hand. You said these guys were amateurs. You really think they'll fall for it? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Arya's lips curled into a small smirk. They're so going to fall for it. They think they've got the upper hand. We just need to give them a reason to doubt themselves. Jake swallowed, trying to steady his breathing. I really hope you're right. Of course I am, she replied, her fingers a blur as she engaged the ship's evasive maneuvers. Now, just keep your eyes on the radar. When I give the signal, hit the button. The seconds dragged on. The sound of the ship's engines filled the silence between them, and Jake's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the past few hours. From bidding on a crate of scrap to being part of an intergalactic fugitive escape, his life had just gone from mundane to completely insane. As if reading his mind, Arya glanced over at him. Hey, you're not going to chicken out now, are you? Jake looked at her, feeling his pulse quicken. I'm not exactly in a position to chicken out, am I? Good, she said, her voice laced with humor. Because if you bail now, I'll have to tell everyone you were too scared to face the challenge. And you don't want that. Jake chuckled, but it came out strained. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a great story to tell. The enemy ships were dangerously close now, almost within firing range. Jake's grip on the armrest tightened as the sweat on his palms grew. He couldn't help but feel the looming threat, the heavy weight of what was at stake. It wasn't just his life on the line. It was Arya's too. And whatever twisted fate had brought him here, he wasn't going to abandon her now. Ready? Arya asked, her voice low but commanding. Jake nodded, his gaze never leaving the radar. Ready. The signal came a moment later, a simple flash of green on the control panel. Without thinking, Jake hit the button. The ship lurched forward as Arya engaged the warp drive, plunging them into the folds of faster-than-light travel. For a split second, everything around them stretched, the stars warping and twisting as they sped through space at impossible speeds. Jake's stomach lurched, and he could barely keep his eyes open as the universe distorted around them. It was a wild, dizzying ride, but it didn't last long. Just as quickly as it had begun, the warp drive powered down, and they emerged on the edge of an asteroid field. The stars around them snapped back into place, but the sensation of having been stretched beyond the limits of space still clung to him. Jake blinked several times, trying to regain his sense of balance as Arya immediately began to scan the area. "We're in the clear," Arya said, her voice full of satisfaction. "They won't be able to follow us here. Not without attracting attention." Jake leaned back in his seat, exhaling deeply. "We did it. We actually did it." Arya gave him a side glance, her lips curling into that infuriatingly smug smirk. "I told you we would. You just had to trust me." Jake couldn't help but shake his head, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You're something else, you know that?" "Yeah, I've heard that before," she replied, her voice dripping with playful arrogance. "But in all fairness, you helped. I'm not a miracle worker, you know." Yeah, Jake said with a roll of his eyes. "You're still the one with the royal blood, the secret knowledge, and all the tricks up your sleeve. I'm just the guy who got lucky with a bid." "Lucky, huh?" Arya raised an eyebrow, turning to face him fully. "Is that how you see it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're the one who helped me dodge their tracking system. You're the one who kept your cool under pressure." Jake chuckled softly, but there was a certain warmth in his chest he hadn't expected. "I'm just glad I didn't screw it up." Arya gave him a pointed look. "Oh, you're a lot more useful than you think." They both fell silent for a moment, the tension from the chase slowly dissolving as the reality of their escape sank in. It wasn't over yet. Arya's royal family would still be after her, and they'd have to stay vigilant. But for now, they had a moment of peace. "So, what happens now?" Jake asked, his voice quieter this time. Arya leaned back in her seat, her gaze distant for a moment. "Now we lay low for a while. We figure out where to go next. But I can promise you this, it won't be boring." Jake sighed, rubbing his neck. "I think that much is clear." Arya smirked again. "Welcome to my world, Jake." And as the ship drifted among the asteroids, with the vastness of space stretching before them, Jake couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, his life had finally found a purpose.